Hello, this is Eric Wright from DiscoPosse.com. You may know me as @DiscoPosse on Twitter, and I wanted to talk quickly today about stateful scripting. This is a presentation I did recently, and it wanted to take people who've generally not dealt with orchestration and give a brief introduction into orchestration techniques and some of the things that we talk about when we mention orchestration and automation. Where we start is we have to talk about the evolution of a script. Now, I don't come from a big programming background, and a lot of folks that are in the scripting environments aren't either. It's encouraging because you don't necessarily need to be a programmer to have come into this world to deal with automation and orchestration. When I start scripting, I tend to script like I think. So I talk about starting small. The good thing about this is you may already be scripting in the way that you think about things, in what you do. So imagine that you wanted to perform an action. So say there's something that I wanted to collect. I want to gather a bunch of information and then take an action on that information. So first, let's just imagine I wanted to, say, get a list of computers. So if I'm going to be using PowerShell, I'm going to use the get AD computer commandlet. From there, we have to think about, maybe we don't want all of them. So let's think about how we want to filter things. Luckily, in PowerShell, it's a very simple thing. You just attach a dash filter parameter, name like something. So whatever filter you want to apply. And this is going to narrow down your collection and it's going to change the things that you gather so that you can take action upon them. Next, you have to think about what it is that we're going to do with them once we've collected them. So what I generally try to do is, if you've got more than one item that you're collecting, you're going to make it into an array. So if we're collecting a bunch of servers as an example, we just call it $servers. And you take the $servers, you make it equal to your get AD computer dash filter, name like something, and that $servers array is going to be populated with the information from the commandlet. So if we've got a bunch of computers that are in our environment, we want to take this and we want to create this collection. And as we said before, we're going to call it $servers. Now this is just a PowerShell example, but think about this in any scripting tool that you use. So we're going to run our collection, which had a particular set of criteria. We're going to go and reach out through this list and say, does this match this criteria? Does it match my criteria? And then maybe some don't. And that's not a problem, because that just means we weren't going to want to perform any particular action on that particular computer. So now that we've got our collection, the next trick is we want to change something. So we are going to perform an action on it. And this is when we have to think about what it is we're trying to do. Understanding the state of something is very important. And when I talk about states, a lot of times people get a little bit confused. They don't necessarily know what it means, especially from a scripting aspect. You know, we think of the states, and obviously there's this big pile of ones that we refer to all the time. Well, unfortunately, that's not the kind of state we're talking about. In this case, the state that we're dealing with is talking about a condition. In this case, it's the particular condition that someone or something is in at a specific time. So what we're going to talk about is, if something has a state, what is that state at that moment? Types of states that we deal with are pretty simple to understand if you think about it that way. There's active, passive, there's on or off, probably one of the most obvious ones, right? Enabled, disabled, present, or missing. So, you know, is a computer present? Is a computer not present? Is the computer on? Is a username present? There's a lot of different states, and it's whether they're enabled, disabled. Again, they're generally binary states, and it's typically on, off. There could be intermediary states as well, though. But we want to think about things simply because that's how we act. Scripting begins with taking simple actions and getting immediate results. Then there's this funny word that we throw around, and it's called Idempotent. Think of it as dem, tent. I know it's a funny word, but sometimes you hear idempotent and idempotent. There's a lot of different ways to say it. I slip in and out all the time. So let's start about defining what idempotent means. Idempotent, as they describe in good old Wikipedia, says denoting an element of a set that is unchanged in value when multiplied or otherwise operated on by itself. Now I know what you're thinking. I'm no further ahead than I was 2 minutes ago on understanding what idempotent means. Well, let's think of it this way. Here is a simple switch. You've probably got a bunch of these in your house. Maybe they look a little different, but they have the general same layout. They have the same states. So if you were to take a light switch and you were to put it into the off state, you're taking it from off and you're putting it to on. Now, go back and try and repeat that same exact action. What happens? Nothing, because it's already in the off state. There's no way to make it off again unless you were to change the state back to on. That is an idempotent change. You repeat the same action and you're not going to get the same result because the state has already been changed. Hopefully that's a good real-world example that makes sense of things. So really, when we talk about this, what does it all mean? Think of it as what exactly you do every day. Because I don't know about you, but I only have a few hours in my day. And out of those hours, only about 8 of them are spent working. At least they're the paid work. So I don't want to spend much more time doing it than I have to. So imagine you've got a finite amount of time and you do a bunch of repetitive processes. They may be small, they may be big, but effectively you're doing the same thing over and over again. Now maybe you've got some stuff that's scripted already, but maybe you run those scripts manually all the time. Maybe there's a better way to kind of accelerate that. This is where orchestration as a methodology comes into play. Orchestration doesn't just save time, but it also ensures consistency. If a script runs, you always know the state of the script, the state of the action, and you're going to understand that if you repeatedly run a script, it's going to have the same result. And this is where we want to talk about the theory of constraints. Because when we want to increase the amount of time that we have in our day and we want to affect change on our organization and our processes, we have to do this at the right place. So there's a fellow named Eli Goldratt, and he wrote an amazing book called The Goal. It's kind of like the Bible for people that work in manufacturing and process flow and logistics. And ultimately it's gone into information technology and software development. And there's a lot of other great places where Goldratt's theories have been highlighted. And he has something called the theory of constraints. Now the theory of constraints, it's so simple, it shouldn't be this simple, but that's the truth of it all. First, let's identify the constraint. That's easy, right? Just find a process or find some flow where there's a bit of a bottleneck. Something that you do that's manual that you want to make orchestrated or automated. Something that's automated that takes a long time and you want to be able to make it faster. That's considered a constraint. Next, you have to decide how to exploit the constraint. So how can you take action upon this constraint in order to reduce the constraint or eliminate the constraint? Then we subordinate and synchronize everything else to the above decisions. I know you're thinking, whoa, what the heck does that mean? That's a great question. But think of it as take every action and every decision you're making and make sure that it's being applied to the constraint. There's a general concept that if you're applying action or work against something that is not a constraint, it's not going to give you a win. So you have to make sure that you are always synchronizing and making your decisions about the constraint and how to exploit the constraint, and that's where you're going to get your best results. Once you've done that, you've now elevated the performance of the constraint. So your automated process that was slow is now faster. Your manual process is now automated. This is a great thing. So you've eliminated or reduced the constraint. So next, number 5 is very important. If in any of the above steps the constraint has shifted, go back to step 1. Now, we don't mean go back to step 1 as in go back to the drawing board, but in a way we do. We mean there's probably still another constraint somewhere in the system. So now you can go back, rethink the process, and then apply your processes and your accelerations against the next constraint. Now, I know that's a very general thing, but I would encourage you to do some reading. If you're in technology and you work in manufacturing or software development or anything at all, one of my favorite books that I always recommend to people is The Phoenix Project, which is written by Gene Kim and George Spafford and Kevin Baer. And they did a great job of taking a real life story about an IT organization in a manufacturing company and how they've applied the theory of constraints and what Gene Kim refers to as the 3 ways. Just dig around for the 3 ways by Gene Kim and you're going to see some great articles on that. So from there, you can take that and I want you to apply that process inside. And I know it's not easy, but it really can be. Start small and work your way up. This is the same way we do scripting. Think about those small details, apply them as needed, and those are your constraints. And then move on to the next step. So I say go forth and script that thing. Do everything you can to try and increase automation and orchestration, even in yourself, in your team, in your organization, and ultimately you're going to get good wins back on that. If you want to share stories or learn more, feel free to email me. I'm eric@discoposse.com, or again, tweet me. I'm @discoposse on Twitter. And hopefully this has been helpful.